Welcome everyone to the Gavin Davis podcast. Tonight we're going to pay a special tribute to not only a fantastic martial artist, but also a great family man, Mr. Geoff Moore. Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you, mate.
Thanks, Gavin. So Geoff was one of Wales and Britain's most popular and respected figures in judo. Geoff held the rank of sixth dan, and he had won medals nationally and internationally in multiple age groups, including the Masters, and he was a multiple kata champion in 4 different kata. He was a British Judo Association Level 3 coach, a senior examiner, and was former director of the Welsh Judo Association. In addition to holding a senior rank in judo, Geoff held multiple black belts in jiu-jitsu, kenjutsu, and kickboxing, and also competed extensively in these events. So what we're going to do is move around the room, and I'm going to start with you, Gav. If you could give me your summary of impressions of Geoff, his achievements, and what he did for you.
Well, I think his achievements stand alone, really, in the North Wales area. I can't think of anyone who had the longevity that Geoff did and achieved so many multiple black belts in multiple martial arts. You know, I've always considered myself, and I know a lot of very people who love martial arts, but I don't think I ever come across anyone as super dedicated to martial arts as what Geoff was. He was massively into the history of martial arts. He would have loved to sit down and have a chat with you over some of the books that you and me read. He was just a book of knowledge, Dave. He really was. Obviously, where he shone bright was with his judo. Going back historically in like the 70s and the 80s, I don't think that people later on realized quite how good Geoff was at judo. Obviously, with his ill health in his later years, the last 20 years of his life, he was still active, but he wasn't that competitor that he was in his prime. And absolute fantastic martial artist. Really, really good chap. I met him, I was going to say around 2000. I remember him coming to Plasma Leisure at a judo club when I was a kid. So that would have been in the 90s. And then I think he had his first illness around 2000, 2001. And I remember him coming back and training, because I was just on the verge of being an adult then. And I remember I think he'd had his first operation when he was poorly. And he got back on the mats, and it was just a pleasure to be on the mats with him. Someone with the experience that Geoff had, plenty of wisdom. Always. Another thing I want to say before I forget, it's very important, this. I never heard him say a bad word about anyone. Just in general. You know, when you're on the mat and everyone has a bitch and a moan about this and that. I never heard that out of Geoff. He's always very optimistic and always like, come on, let's do some throws, let's do this. And I know Daryl's smirking, so Daryl's agreeing with me now, but that's one thing that I really remember about Geoff, was that he never slagged anyone off, and he was just happy to be on the mats enjoying what he did best, mate. So yeah, that's when I first really got to know him. And then in later years, obviously when I was at Elite with Daryl and Cosgrove and Iron and Ollie Morris and all that, Geoff had a massive impact on that club in the Oswestry area. And then our friendship really grew when obviously I was down there full time when I was living in Oswestry, mate.
Okay, thank you. I wonder if maybe we could come to you now, Claire. If you could pick up on Geoff in judo, how you met him and how you knew him through judo.
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd say is just sort of agree with what's gone before, really. Not only was Geoff like a great judoka and a great budoka, he was a great bloke. I think he was sort of arguably the most selfless person I've ever met. Geoff always put others ahead of himself. Whenever you wanted help, Geoff was there for you, whether that was in the judo or budo context or in like a personal context. He was always there. I sort of first met him when I sort of started doing judo in in sort of the mid 80s, really. I used to see him at the various gradings in Colwyn Bay, in Ayres Park, when I was sort of going up through the grades. He was always there to help. You know, if somebody, he needed a nuke, a partner to demonstrate throws with, you know, everybody used to pick Geoff because he was fantastic. He had a talent for making you look brilliant, even if you weren't really. I sort of got to know him a little bit later on then, when I was leading the coaching courses down in Cardiff, and Geoff used to come down with like two other very prominent North Wales judoka, Graham Wright, who was an expert in kata, and John Walsh, who was also an expert in kata, and Geoff's kata partner for doing various competitions. And I sort of got to know him through that, really. You know, he became you know, a real friend, a colleague, and a confidant, and a real trusted go-to person whenever you wanted something sort of showing and shown well in judo.
Thanks, Claire. Daryl, maybe you can tell us how you met Geoff and what his achievements were in the areas that you trained with him.
Yeah, so I guess I was slightly different because I didn't know Geoff before he'd been ill the first time. I only met him after he'd already been ill, so I didn't know him in his prime. Sorry. I met him when I first started doing jiu-jitsu seriously when I was like 17. He was my first training partner, actually. I just kind of went there, and then my coach was like, right, go train with this guy, this little like small little guy and at the side. And yeah, I very, very quickly learned that yeah, you shouldn't underestimate someone just because of like their age and size. As much as Gav says, like he was always very nice to people. Like it didn't feel very nice the first night or two where I'd just been slammed relentlessly into the floor. But yeah, we grew to get along quite well after that. And like Claire was saying, like you just go out of your way to help people. Like he's always there for myself and some of my other friends that were like had rough time in their like early adulthood, and like he would always help me, like, or like offer to help if I was struggling like financially and stuff, and like just always go out of his way kind of thing.
Okay, thank you, Daryl. Claire, can we come back to Geoff's record in the British kata competitions, and in particular, can you tell us about the 4 kata he mastered, and really what was his expertise in these, and what he meant to the kind of kata community and its development in the UK?
Yeah, well, kata and kata competitions are sort of quite prominent now, but Geoff and his kata partner, John Walsh, were very prominent and were British kata champions before it sort of enjoyed the popularity that it does now. So in many ways, Geoff and John and Graham kept sort of the kata flame burning bright in the UK when it was sort of diminishing in many places. He was so the role that Geoff took was uke, the person who sort of takes the techniques, receives the techniques, and him and John, were British champions in the 2 combat kata, Kodokan Goshin Jitsu and Kimono kata, and he was also British champion in Nagano kata and also in Gono Sen no kata, which is not a Kodokan kata, but a kata of counter techniques, quite often performed in slow motion. And you can go on YouTube and perhaps you can find some old films of John and Geoff doing those, and it really was a thing of beauty. And not only that, Geoff was sort of quite creative in kata. Him and John and Graham had worked out their own version of katamino kata, which is sort of the kata of holds, which looks sort of pretty static and pretty artificial. But they made their own version where all the sort of the techniques were still there, but they were sort of live, realistic, and dynamic. So that made quite an impression on me the first time I saw that. And whenever sort of the North Wales boys, as we used to call them, came down to Cardiff, you could be really guaranteed of a quality kata session.
So am I right in saying that they were there at the kind of the beginning of kata competition and pioneered its development? Would that be fair to say?
They were. So kata competitions are essentially started in the UK by a gentleman called Mick Lee, who was 90 this week and was promoted to 9th Dan earlier in the week. And Geoff and John and Graham were very much part of the cohort of judoka that responded to that movement, and they were there right in the early days of kata competition, really, and really made quite an impression on it. You know, their participation contributed to the success of it and it taking off.
Did they? Was kata competition an international event at this time? Did they compete internationally? Or was there...
No, it was pretty very much a domestic event. So kata competition they were started in the UK. Then there was like the international martial master athletes group that took it on, competing internationally. But that came much later. So kata competition started in the UK. Where Geoff competed internationally was in masters judo or veterans judo, which again has taken off and become a massive part of judo now.
And how was Geoff viewed within the judo community practicing kata, and also in the broader judo community in the UK?
I think he was he was very, very much respected. He was very, very well liked as well as being respected. So respect and being liked doesn't always go together. Everybody liked Geoff and respected him. I think he was a British international in veterans competitive judo, Shiai, so he could do it on the mat, and he still made his contributions in kata as well. People would look around and worry about what their medal prospects were if Geoff and his kata partner were there.
Thanks, Claire. I think we'll come back to you, Daryl. Could you talk about Geoff's coaching at Elite Martial Arts and what he gave to the Oswestry community?
Yeah, I guess you could say that Geoff was like one of the great recruiters, I guess. He was forever I guess in Oswestry he was kind of always trying to bring a greater cooperation between the clubs, because I guess back when I started that we were a bit more stratified, everyone kind of kept to themselves, and he kind of he would join all the clubs and try and get them all to kind of cross train and stuff. I guess probably when I was coming up to my second or third year doing jiu-jitsu, he recommended me to start going over to Elite, and at that time he was teaching the beginners classes and also a lot of the kids classes. But yeah, I think his main contribution was trying to bring everyone together and foster a greater sense of community within the town, I think.
And Gavin, was it at Elite Martial Arts that you met Geoff? Can you relay some of what his teaching meant to you?
Yeah, so when I moved down to the Oswestry area, when I met my wife, Geoff was at Elite, and I started training at Elite with Rich Cosgrove and the lads, and then Daryl joined us slightly later. And Geoff was already an integral part of that club, and like Daryl said, he'd done a little bit of free fighters as well, Morgan, and I think Daryl, that's where you started, didn't you?
Yeah, so he originally we went over to free fighters.
Yeah,
we trained there, and then free fighters started to close down. So then I was training at both Elite and free fighters.
Yeah. So like Daryl said, he brought everything together, and I was competing at pro MMA level then, and just before that, Geoff had been doing amateur MMA bouts, so he'd been ill in around 2000, 2001 when he had his first bout with his illness. Then he trained for a long period of time. And then I would say probably around 2010, maybe a touch earlier than that, he started doing some amateur MMA bouts on top of his judo and everything else, which is a fantastic achievement considering how poorly he'd been and the operations he'd been through. So he was a massive part of that club. When I don't think you realize how important people are until sometimes they're gone. Do you know what I mean? Geoff, like Geoff to me was 90% of that club. Do you know what I mean? Even if me and Daryl were training in the morning, he'd pop in and just show his face. He'd just pop it. All right, lads, you okay? I'd have a chat for 5-10 minutes while me and Daryl were having a rest. And then he'd be off to run an errand for whatever he was doing, or going back to look after his wife, or, he was a great family man as well. So as busy as he was, he always made time for for his friends, his students, and the clubs that he helped. I know in that Oswestry area, he was massively well respected, for not just as a martial artist, just as a human being.
So what I'd like to do now is invite any stories that give a sense of Geoff the person, maybe his humour, what he was like. I don't know, has anyone got one ready to start with?
Yeah, so I've got one. So Danny, who is going to do he's going to do like a video announcement for Geoff, because they were very good friends and very close in that. I remember Danny training one night, and I think that Danny was the first person to put Daryl to sleep. Is that right, Daryl?
That is correct, yeah.
Yeah, I think he caught Daryl in a choke and he put Daryl to sleep. So, but Geoff and Danny were training at Elite, and Danny was put with a younger lad, and Danny was working at a really fast pace. So this lad said to Danny and Geoff, "Take your time." And they turned round just jokingly and said, "We ain't got much time left." And just the way like he said it, and the whole gym just was laughing and erupting, and it was just total banter. And it was just typical the way Geoff just laughed things off straight over his head, just had a laugh and a joke, bit of optimism. Let's crack on and let's keep training. Because as I say, he was still training multiple arts, and he was training really, really hard, even at that stage. So that's always one that stands out with me, just how funny and how witty he was when he wanted to be.
Brilliant. Llyr, do you have any stories to relate?
Yeah, so I think the one that I sort of relate just sort of goes to his character, really. When he was sort of very, very ill, he did not want to be defined by his illness in any way. And to go through the examinations for 6th Dan, you need to sort of get certificates in kata. And he asked me, would I examine him for those certificates? He didn't want any concessions at all. He sort of really, really did it properly and did it sort of very well. And throughout the entire process, he wanted sort of no special decisions. He just wanted to be sort of totally humble and be accepted in that grade amongst his peers, really. That sort of really, really revealed his character to me.
I remember because we filmed those katas together. We actually filmed that at Elite. Yeah. He get it slightly wrong. He's like, "No, Daryl, we've got to start again." And it wasn't like, "We'll just do this one throw again." It's like, "No, we're starting again. We're doing it right," kind of thing. Bless him. Yeah, I guess for me, it was just sort of his cheeky side. We'd go down to Ford Judo Club, and even though he was still quite ill, he could still just absolutely trash me at judo. So he'd just have one grip on my lapel. We'd be walking around, and he'd start having a conversation with someone else, kind of thing, just to distract me. I'm like, "Oh, what's he doing?" And then suddenly I'd be in the air, and he'd swept my feet out from underneath me. His foot sweeps were pretty evil, but very effective. If I could ever get foot sweeps as good as anyone, it'd be Geoff. But I think I've got a long way to go.
Yeah, I've got another one, Dave, as well. So when we were at Elite, Rich Cosgrove, who was the owner of the gym, I think he started texting Geoff's daughter. Okay. And I said to Geoff, I said, "Listen, keep him away from your daughters." Right. And he said to me, he goes, "Gav," he said, "obviously I'm older now. I couldn't give him my ID." And he said, "But I'm already on it. I am making sure they're staying well away from that bad boy." But same again, it was just Geoff's wittiness and his humor. And he was always considering what he went through, right, which would get a lot of people down. I suppose he did have his moments to himself where he got down, but I never saw it. Every time I spoke to him, he was always in good spirits, and he was just always a good laugh, and you could have a crack with him,
So I never knew Geoff, but obviously, listening to your stories and the respect you guys have for him and how he was held, I mean, I would have loved to have met him. But I guess what does his loss mean for you personally and the communities that you're still part of?
Well, I think first of all, is the knowledge that went with Geoff's passing. So I think he had a depth of knowledge which is which was not unique, but he was genuine and very, very knowledgeable. And I think his infectious enthusiasm could pull people into sort of all aspects of judo, sort of including kata. And I think he just had a way of being able to get along with everybody and make what he was showing on the mat relevant to them, make it real, make it fun, make it meaningful. I think he was so strong interpersonally. I never saw him grumpy. I always saw him exactly the same way, the same consistent Geoff, helpful, thinking of others, and real quality.
Yeah, well, obviously, like his passing, did hit me quite hard. I guess it was, as much as I still enjoy martial arts, it's not been the same. I mean, me and Geoff would go to a lot of martial arts together. So I'd say 4 or 5 nights a week, we'd be going somewhere in the country together, whether it be out to Cornwall to do Japanese sword, or up to Shrewsbury to do BJJ and stuff. So I guess for me, it's the thing that I missed the most was just the car journeys. Geoff was I'm not gonna say a bad driver, but a car trip that could have taken 20 minutes, we'd miss one turn and then suddenly we'd be the other side of the country, and it's been taking 3 hours. But the stories that he'd tell, like you said, the depth of knowledge that he had, just the conversations we get into, and his passion was, I've never really met anyone quite like that, and something I definitely miss.
Yeah, Dave, you'd have loved him, with because he was into his reading of his books and everything, and his history and his knowledge base was right up there, So without a shadow of a doubt, we've had Llyr on the podcast before, we've had Daryl on, we'd definitely had Geoff on. Do you know what I mean? Which is obviously a shame, but the big thing for me was that I could see him deteriorating. He would put a post up on Facebook, and I remember he passed away, and I was due to come home in the March. He passed away in the Feb, and I was due to come home in the March, and I said to my wife, I said that when I go home, I was only home for 3 or 4 days, I was going to get up to Oswestry and try and get a coffee with Geoff just to see him. And unfortunately, I couldn't do that, but I was messaging him, but same again, he would never really tell you how poorly he was, but you could see it in himself, and he wasn't well. So like Daryl, it hit me hard, to be fair. I was really upset about it, and I just think it's a sad loss. It's a massive loss for his family, for his children, his daughter Natalie, his wife Karen, who he cared for. He's a full-time carer as well. It's an amazing thing. He was working still up until the last 12 months of his life. So, it really upset me, the fact that someone who had so much passion and so much to give, it was taken out of his hands to be able to get on the mats every day and to spend time with his family because of this illness. And I just thought it was so sad, and he'd be sadly missed by everyone, mate. Everyone in that Oswestry area, everyone on the judo mats. Everyone will miss him, and I think that it's just terrible.
Just so you understand a bit about Geoff and I came back to judo when I was about 65 years old or so, in order to keep fit, and to do that I came up to Ford Judo Club around 2012, where one night I met Geoff. He was quite taken with me, as I was older than him and only a first kyu, with the intention of training for a competitive first dan. When I explained this to Geoff, after he had duffed me up a bit, he, without saying anything, took me under his wing, and every night from then on, he took a delight in combining a combination of duffing me up and teaching me how to fight. He then started to come with me to downgradings all over the Midlands and North Wales. I remember a number of these camps, but one that stands out is going up to Bangor and fighting the university students from Bangor, 18 to 20-year-olds, with muscles in their spit. I got lucky that I won one fight with a hold down, having lost the previous 4 and coming off the mat. And Geoff got hold of me and we started to do a jig around the mat. So you could see the situation. All these young university guys looking at us, and there's these 2 old gits doing a jig around the mat because I'd won one fight. Which have raised a few eyebrows around there, I can tell you. This is also one of the times that they asked me to go into a lineup for a couple of the uni boys who were going for their first dan. But Geoff and another great friend of mine, Llyr Jones, who most of you know, stepped in and stopped the organisers, as I was totally done in after fighting these uni guys. From then on, Alan and Geoff did a lot of travelling all over Europe, really, fighting and just generally getting stuck into all sorts of situations. Many of them my own making, I must admit. If you've seen some of Geoff's emails that have been flying about me with a Russian hat and upsetting Americans in Brussels, and Russian hat in Bordeaux, and a few bits and pieces that we got up to, and the times are there. There were lots of times, very many times, when I came off the mat and hadn't won a fight at all. And Geoff was always there consoling me and looking on the bright side, and could go on about a number of things that we got up to. But the one incident that happened at Ford Club, and I will finish on this because, as I say, I'm not very good at this sort of thing. One night back in 19, to which Geoff went home and wrote it up on an email and sent it to me. And it goes like this. Geoff writes this, and I've printed off the email so I can read it to you. And this is his own words that he sent me. And it goes like this. Geoff wrote, the judo club I attend is based in a village community centre, which we are busy having a punch-up in the main hall, and music group meet in the next room learning to play the ukulele. The judo is often accompanied by Beatles classics and sometimes, as today, Oasis tunes stumbled on a ukulele by housewives taking a break from the drudgery of domesticity. Danny Bidgood is a crazy old man who attends the judo club at 72. He's wheeled out on the mat where he's let rip at people fighting like a Davidist until someone tells him it's time for cocoa and bed. Me? Cocoa and bed? Dan and I were taken in turns to avoid grips and control each other's postures, an exercise which provides a throwing attack or takedown. Danny has a version of practicing which involves him being as awkward and as aggressive as possible. Consequently, I was eager to attack him quite robustly. Long story short, we became entangled, and like 2 rotting bulls, we bashed into the door of the music room, which flew open, and Danny and I tumbled into the centre of a circle of shock ukulele ladies playing on their ukes. Danny got up, dusted himself down and said, "Excuse us, ladies, I'm just schooling this young buck in the art of judo." That's not quite right. He was teaching me more than anything else, but that's the sort of tricks that Geoff and I used to get up to. I could go on for hours on the number of things we've done and not done all over Europe, but I'm not, as I say, I'm not very good on this judo, so I hope this covers everything you need to know. Thanks for that, guys. Bye now.
Hi there, name's Keith Morgan, 9th Dan Aika Jiu-Jitsu, Yodansha and instructor in Enshin Itoru Bato Jutsu, and that's how I met Geoff. Most of you watching this have probably known Geoff a lot longer than I have. I only knew him for about 2 years, 2.5 years, but Geoff is one of those people that if you met him for the first time, it's almost as if you knew him all your life. He's just one of those characters. He's open, friendly, inviting, warm, and just a really, really great guy. Geoff came to my sword classes and took up the sword with me, learned a traditional Bato Jutsu system. Obviously, he confided with me about his illness. In the early months, he was obviously training very, very hard, and to be honest, he trained very hard until the end, but it was getting difficult with the weight of the sword. From there, he actually started going to some of my jiu-jitsu classes as well, either at my home dojo here, or he even travelled with me to Rugeley, where I had a full-time dojo at the time, and he even joined in with the children's classes as well as the adults classes, and he became a popular figure there as well. He did give me the accolade that he wished he'd met me many years ago to learn the jiu-jitsu, because he quite enjoyed my take on it, how I interpret the moves and put them together. And obviously he got great knowledge, so high, and we just had some great discussions. We've done a couple of seminars together, notably for Kevin O'Connor and the Shin Budo Association. Again, I've got the opportunity to not only train with Geoff, but to watch him teach as well, and he was an outstanding teacher. And he might have only been a little guy, but my God, he got some power. He knew how to hit, he knew how to throw, but he always had that smile on his face. I was chatting with him right up until the morning of when he was no longer with us, but the discussions obviously get a little bit difficult. He will be missed, not just as a friend, but as a fellow martial artist, and I think as a teacher. The world, not just the martial arts world, but the world did lose a fabulous human being with Geoff. He was just an outstanding person all the way through. I've sent some photographs in as well, so from a collection of Geoff, so again I hope you enjoy those as well. To say, I don't think I can say anything new that none of you all already know or feel, or perhaps even said on this podcast already, but he was that sort of guy. Okay, thank you very much, and I'm flattered that I was asked.
Yeah, I just like to thank, first of all, Geoff's family for giving us the go ahead to be able to do this. Me and you spoke about this, Dave. I wanted to do this for Geoff. Geoff deserved it. He deserved everything he got in martial arts plus more. He was a great martial artist. He'd be sadly missed by everyone, and I was just grateful to spend the time with him that I did. And I feel that a bit selfish that I couldn't spend any more time with him, because I'd love to spend more time on the mats with him, and I know Daryl and all the lads and girls would have all been exactly the same. So thanks, Geoff, for everything you ever did for me and the lads at Elite. I appreciate it, and you'll never be forgotten, mate.
You know, I think I was privileged to write the tribute to Geoff for the Welsh Judo Association, and I think I sort of described Geoff as a person who really lived his life the Budo way, and I perhaps never meant that more sincerely than when I wrote it about Geoff. He was a great guy.
Yeah, just echo everyone else's sentiments. Yeah, just sorely missed, and very massive loss to the community.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your tributes. Clearly an outstanding martial artist and an even more outstanding human being who'll be missed by everyone whose lives he touched. So thank you very much, everyone. This has been a fitting way to end season 1 of the podcast. We will be back soon with season 2 with more outstanding guests and great stories from martial arts. So thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.